Just waiting to stream on YouTube. G'day, peeps. Says it's sending data to YouTube. We're there. Sweet. We're streaming. Let's do it.
Sweet as.
G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL Fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players who are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Heff and tonight I'm joined by Checkers. How are you, mate?
Good to be back. Great. Fantastic to be here.
Yeah, pretty happy about it.
Yeah, after the weekend, I've been called back.
So for those who missed it or didn't hear about it, we did a live show on the weekend. So that was at the Highway in Adelaide before the Traders / DT talk show. So good fun, that one. Checkers, how'd you feel up on stage talking about AFL Fantasy?
Yeah, to be honest, I played for 5 gigs on the weekend. Jesus. And I was thinking about it, my last one, I was like, the biggest crowd I was in front of this weekend was at the Highway talking about fantasy football.
So there was probably about 150, maybe 200 people.
Yeah, it was a full beer
garden. Yeah, definitely.
And packed out real early as well, so it was a lot of people were interested to hear what you had to say. You did a really good job. So
did you. Thanks. Yeah. It was good to have you on stage. And yeah, we had Louis up there with us, Tommy Wyman from Rookie Me Central, and now the Keeper League, I guess. And Dossie absolutely stole the show. Yeah, so
highlight.
Probably the most nervous man beforehand. And just walks up with like swagger that you've just like never seen before. From
Sunglasses on.
Yeah, exactly. The fake AFL Fantasy hat. And yeah, pretty much played his part perfectly. His new song came out. We won't give too much away because I think he wants to have the exclusive on his Twitter handle.
He got a standing ovation at the end of the song.
Yeah, absolutely. So so you guys can wait to see what player he's chosen to destroy for this year. But you might be pleasantly surprised on this one. So
no, it was a real good day out.
All right, well, we're going to get stuck into the show. So on the weekend, we saw a heap of match simulations. What did you take out of it, Checkers? Anything really relevant? What do you think?
I don't know. Like I said before, I just had a heap of gigs on the weekend, so I actually rewatched six games last night.
Yep.
I had them on at work throughout the week and had them on my phone side of the decks while I was playing and whatnot, but
awesome.
Couldn't really tune in too heavily.
Yeah.
So last night I rewatched them all, and probably the major takeout was the coverage and the commentary was terrible.
Yeah, some of those games. One where I think it was a Sydney-Brisbane game.
Brisbane, they had water getting the microphones.
Oh, is that what happened?
And they had to wait for them to dry out. So as the game went on, the static got a little bit better, but geez, the first quarter was almost unbearable. I watched it on mute.
Yeah.
And it was hard to follow a practice game on mute because you can't pick up who's who.
Because the camera works so bad, you can't really see who's who. So you need to kind of listen
out there.
Who it is.
Yeah. And I think it was North Richmond when I finished off the Savo. Half the ground was cut off by where the camera was set up. They had construction work.
Yeah, I saw that one actually.
So for a lot of the game, the commentators were speaking, but you couldn't see where the ball was.
Fremantle Crows had a lot of static.
Yeah, no, it was hopefully a little bit better this week.
And I've noticed, I think it was Michael Barlow, Will Schofield and Xavier Ellis all have the same voice, I'm pretty sure. So they all talk the exact same way. So I wasn't actually sure who was commentating all the weekend. Pretty sure it was mainly Barlow and one Will Schofield, but it could have been Xavier Ellis, I don't really know. But yeah, apart from that, there was some actual footy played. So we'll get into some of the hotter topics from the weekend. I actually watched 7 out of 8 games. I say 7 out of 8 games. Some I switched off after all the resis came on in the fifth quarter and stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't watch the second halves because they were mostly the VFL, sample sort of setups.
Yeah, there were some kind of players that lingered over, but yeah, it was very much hard to get anything real out of it, given that...
my second halves, I watched the first 4 quarters because a lot of the games are 8-quarter games.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So we'll get stuck into what we saw of those in the main parts that we watched anyway. So apologies if we missed some of the late happenings, but they're probably not going to be that relevant anyway. We'll start with Hawthorn versus Geelong. I'll just go through what I saw, Checkers, and then I'll get you to just comment on whatever you think is relevant. So the first thing, I guess the biggest talking point probably of the weekend, or one of the biggest talking points, was Will Day. Just bulk. He had 50%, I think, in the end of CBAs, and just looked classy out there, really. I don't know if he would have got a heap of it and scored highly, but when he did get it, he was influential, and it felt like Newcomb was like your in and under type player. Finn McGuinness was doing a lot of tagging, like type of accountable roles, and Will Phillip just looked like that kind of guy you distributed out to, who looked like a bit classier. Will Day, sorry.
No, you're right. He had most of the CBAs, and I just noted that he kicked the ball a lot. he was a lot quicker than I thought. Because when he was drafted as like a halfback flanker. And I didn't think he had the pace to play in the midfield, but he's got like height and pace. It was a good mix to add to that Hawthorn midfield because like Newcomb's not massive, Warple's not massive. So yeah, I think Day's 189 centimetres, and you just notice it sort of like a bigger body, even though he's not very thick, just that height factor.
Yeah, he's
made him a bigger body in the midfield. And yeah, I thought he racked up a fair bit of the ball. I put in my notes, he has a lot of like Isaac Smith about him, just skinny, tall, runs all day. Like he's got a massive tank. And he's actually quite quick, so great ball use. So yeah, I've definitely put him well up my list after watching that game.
The only, I'm obviously salty because I traded him to K's. I think it was last December or maybe really early January. I thought he was going to be a winger and just irrelevant, dime a dozen type player. Gill on midfield. The one thing I will say is like we saw Dylan Moore not get one CBA. We saw Carl Amon not get a CBA after getting a heap at Port Adelaide and probably being one of their more senior midfielders.
And then Wingard.
I expect Wingard to have a few as well.
Played predominantly forward, so I don't know if that's going to be his role all year.
Yeah,
he might warm into the midfield a little bit later on in the year, but
this weekend to be telling. I suspect there might have just been like a bit of just a trial of a few different people, or just giving extended minutes to a few people. But yeah, wait and see what happens this weekend. But yeah, Warple was another one that was in there. So James Warple, that is. Heaps of CBAs as well, and got a fair bit of it. He just can't kick.
He's terrible.
Yeah, so
terrible ball use.
I just don't know whether he's going to be that grunt player and they're going to allow him some freedom to be a bit shit with the ball, or he's just not going to be in the best 22. But when you go through their midfield, there is not much there. So I really don't know where he's at. What are your thoughts on Warple?
Yeah, I just know he was terrible with the ball use. He didn't find as much ball as I thought he would. Like they've tracked him as a massive preseason. It was just a pretty standard games as what we would have expected from him last year in the team.
Yeah,
like it wasn't back to those early days when he was racking up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. See it again, give another chance.
Yeah, we'll look at it this weekend. But yeah, I don't know if he's got into Sam Mitchell's good books after this weekend, that's for sure. Judging by how he was treated last season anyway. One of the rookies, Josh Weddle, I just noticed he got a run on the wing but didn't really do too much. Touched on Finn McGuinness before, had a heap of CBAs, but it was more of like, a tagging role. I didn't realise he's only 22 though. He looks like a player that they actually want to get in the midfield, judging the last 2 and a bit years. They've actually tried to use him in there.
A couple of years now, just had a good crack. They talk about he always wins the running in the preseason and stuff, so like massive running tank. But yeah, he's never been a massive accumulator.
Yeah.
Even his junior days wasn't like racking up a lot of the ball, so I don't know if it's overly fantasy relevant.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just I thought it was. I don't know, when they stick a player into tag, they could be learning the craft a little bit. But I think also as well, he's actually just good at running with players too. So not much to take out of it. I just noticed he was really high up in the CBA count. Bramble had a lot of the kick-ins for Hawthorn, I noticed. So he's just one to watch this weekend. James Sicily was kind of everywhere as well, taking a heap of marks. But he was the main kick-in candidate, Bramble was. So just there could be a few cheap stats coming that way. Big talking point, been tagging K's in a few things over the weekend. Obviously, I am a big Ned Reeves man. And he is the Lloyd Meek man. And Ned Reeves, he had the 73% of the CBAs, I think. And Meek had the rest of them, which was in the teens. So my take on it was Meek looked like the better forward of the two. Just looked more mobile, could get on a lead, take a grab. They were starved for opportunity, but there was a couple of times where actually got on the lead, took a grab out in front. Whereas like Reeves is a bit more of a bomb-it-on-head type operator, given his size.
Yeah,
I just don't think it suited the way that Hawthorn wanted to play. So I think we might find, at least why Mitch Lewis is out, I think we might find Meek playing a bit more forward, spending more time forward. But then again, who knows? Like this weekend, they could just swap it over and test it the other way. So I think they're playing down in Tassie against Collingwood, I think. So we'll have to see what happens there.
That'll be the interesting one because Collingwood have quite a good tall defensive unit. So it'll really put those forwards to test. So, see who's the better forward crafts and stuff. They got real good key defenders. So yeah.
Absolutely. Just touching on a few more. Fergus Green, he looked pretty good, but I just don't think his fantasy output is going to be high. But he was a mature age recruit this season. And Connor McDonald just kind of continued what he did last year on the wing. Again, wouldn't have scored huge, but just good to see him in that midfield mix. Moving on to Geelong, Jack Bowes absolutely racked it up.
He only played, was it the first half?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but he was in the midfield and racking up heaps of like kicks, like cross. What do they call them? Switching across the ground a lot. So yeah.
Well, he started forward. That was the crazy part, and I think he only had 2 CBAs for the game, but he did push up the ground, like kind of in between the 2 arcs type thing. So pretty impressive debut from him. A lot of players missing though, and a lot of players sat out the game as well. So interesting to see how that one makes up. But if you're a Jack Bowes owner, you would definitely be pretty happy with that start anyway. And probably the biggest talking point, one of the biggest talking points of this game was Tanner Bruhn. CBAs, like galore, played most of the game, where a lot of the other midfielders kind of, jumped out. But yeah, did some really nice things in the middle, probably best on ground for Geelong as well. Does that surprise you a little bit? I think Louis last year wasn't pretty
I think we were
keen, yeah.
I really liked what he did at GWS. Like, I definitely had him earmarked for like big things, and I stashed him in a few keeper leagues because he just reminds me a little bit of like a young Lachie Whitfield. Like, he's just got really good run and carry at times, and he just, that outside sort of run really sparked me early days at GWS. So I've had him like highlighted for 2 years now. But yeah, when he was at Geelong, you sort of get concerned because they've kind of coming into the Premiers like top side. Just where do you fit in there as a young kid? And we didn't expect to see that many CBAs, and expect to see him play the whole game, or but he did well. So
yeah,
I mean, they're only playing Hawthorn, and we've just said before, Hawthorn have a very inexperienced midfield. Yeah, probably one of the more inexperienced midfields in the whole comp. So I'd like to see it tested a little bit harder, like coming up against a better engine room. But yeah.
Yeah, not bad signs there for sure. Just one thing I noticed early, Menegola was racking it up. His value is probably at an all-time low, I reckon. And I'm not sure if he's actually in their best 22, but he didn't really take a step backwards on the weekend anyway, so he did okay for when he was there. I just think he might be someone you could pick up like really, really late in your drafts, and he might provide values depending on injuries and things like that in Geelong. And role changes, Asava Radigalia. Down back.
Radigalia down back and Jack Henry up forward.
That's right. Intercepting a lot, Radigalia.
He had a very like Alia type role. Like, he was getting free a lot. Yeah. And just hitting every contest that came into the forward 50. I think he had 3 intercept marks in like the first 10 minutes of the game. Yeah.
The thing is, like, is he best 22 still if that's his role? Like, their defensive unit does seem kind of set, but I don't know.
I feel like Jack Henry was only playing up forward because Hawkins was missing.
Yeah, that's true.
So they were using a fair bit of height up, lacking height down there because Cameron's not the biggest body as well. Yeah. So they were using Jack Henry, Ollie Henry. They hit the scoreboard pretty well, played a good game, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think Jack will go back once Hawkins is back in the team. So
yeah, you got to take these kind of games with a pinch of salt, I guess. Was there anything else you saw in the game?
The standout for me was Ollie Dempsey, and I knew nothing about him. I didn't even know who he was. Yeah, right. At first, I thought he was either Zach Guthrie or Sam De Conning because he's got the long blonde hair. Yeah. And I actually had to look him up like after about 5 minutes of the game because he was just doing all sorts. Like, he just had so much X factor around the ball. So I looked him up. He's from the rookie draft.
He debuted last year and he was pretty impressive, I reckon, but playing more of a smaller forward.
Yeah, he played a couple games, I think. But he's got the long blonde hair like the rest of the Geelong unit. Yeah. And he was just doing some crazy things. Like, he was around the goals, taking snaps at goal. He was linking up a lot. Yeah. I just saw this guy's crazy. I looked into his stats. So he finished the VFL year last year. It was a 29 disposal game, and he scored 130 in. Yeah. And averaged 71 for the year in the VFL. So I just one that was completely off my radar. I didn't expect it. I didn't know who he was. Like, I didn't even correlate. I mean, would have heard the name 2 years ago or whatever. I had no idea he was on their list or who he was. So yeah, just put a little mark next to him as maybe like a potential rookie bolter that we could look at. But yeah, Zach Guthrie looked nice. He finished the year pretty strong last year, and I know Dossie's pretty hot on him. So
the Zote, he calls him.
Yeah, no, he was just doing general Zach Guthrie things. So yeah, other than that, what you've covered is it's bang on. Jack Bowes looked good. Yeah.
I'm keen to see him this weekend. I'm hoping a few more of the players actually play full games so we can get a better look at what their makeup's going to be. But Geelong are going to be interesting to see how they go this year, backing up that flag. Next game, Gold Coast versus Essendon. I don't know how much we can take out of this game because it felt like neither team tried at the same time. I felt like one side had their best side on early and the other side was easing it in, and it kind of merged somewhere in the middle where it was quite competitive in the second quarter.
Such an awkward game to watch as well because they played on like a local footy ground.
Yeah, in like Sunset as well.
Yeah, like out of it was one of the weirdest games to watch and just pick up things. You couldn't really see the Guernsey numbers because of the sunset. Yeah. Couldn't really, and the camera view was so far away. I don't know. It was just hard to watch and follow.
Well, I hope I got some of these things right and I didn't just the camera blur wasn't, making my eyes see things. But the first thing I noticed was Sam Flanders, a lot of pre-season hype. He was really good up forward. Did spend a little bit of time on the wing and a couple CBAs in there as well, but predominantly forward, don't you reckon?
Yeah, he was very strong up forward. He reminded me of when Alex Sexton had that massive year the other year and was just like kicking bags of goals. Small, coming forward, but can also play tall. He was quite a big body. And yeah, he was just hitting packs, taking contested marks, but also crumbing. So yeah, pretty impressive sort of game. I don't think he'll see much midfield time. I don't think he'll pump out tons. But yeah, I mean, he's probably in a lot of waivers at the moment as well because he hasn't had much scoring history.
Yeah, he might be there in a few draft pools, that's for sure. I guess Charlie Constable, we'll just talk about the halfback line. I guess there's a lot of holes to fill this year. And Constable looked, pretty comfortable back there. So he could be a round one starter. Do you think with like Powell coming back, Weller coming back, do you just feel like if you pick up one of these guys, you're only going to have them for 5-6 weeks or so?
Yeah, I mean, Constable had one of the unluckiest careers of all time. He just can't get a good run at it.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him just have 5 games in a row of like 25 plus touches and just lock his spot down, but it's going to be a bit hard off the halfback flank. He played a good game. He's getting lots of the ball. All he needs is game time, and it's just like you said, those guys coming back, is he going to keep getting game time?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he probably goes pretty close to putting his hand up for round one.
I'd say he probably plays round one, but there is a lot to come back into that Gold Coast side from injury. So
yeah. Another one, I guess, on that half-back line I didn't really expect was Darcy McPherson. Looked pretty comfortable back there as well. Now, he's played so many different roles over the years, but if he can lock down a half-back line, he could be pretty fruitful back there because he kind of plays the right game for it. It's just, again, the exact same thing. When everyone's fit and back, does he hold a spot there? Does he move forward and become irrelevant again? Like, who knows with him? So just wanted to flag that he might be value early, but I wouldn't be expecting anything long-term. Into the kind of midfield mix, Elijah Hollands was used on the wing a lot, so he will continue that role. Wings just tend to get skipped a bit these days in terms of the fast movement of the ball. So he's just one I like the look of him, but I think we might be waiting for a while if he can somehow move inside or something like that. I don't know. They seem to pigeonhole him into a wing though, so I'm just not sure how he'll go in the future. Alex Davies had a lot of midfield time from the naked eye anyway, and so did Bailey Humphrey. I think plays like a similar type role, like forward mid.
Bailey Humphrey. I think he had a couple shots at goal. Yeah, but he's quite like a bigger body. Like he could play a lot of footy this year. He's quite thick for a first year player.
I think those two might be competing for a spot this year. But
I mean they didn't have Miller. Took Miller in the side, so it was who is a contested ball winner as well, so I'd love to see them all in the same team.
Yeah, I think Davies did nothing wrong, I don't think, on this game either, so he could be someone up there. And I think he's got forward status again this season, so if he can get a bit more of an extended midfield run, could be a little sneaky late pick up there. And Ed Moyle, really, he held his own in the ruck, but I think Witch is still going to be clear number one. But what's your take on Ned Moyle's game?
Yeah, Ned Moyle has a really juicy mullet, so he just stood out straight away. He's a big, lanky sort of bloke. And I know just from speaking to a few of the Gold Coast boys over the years that he's quite a bit of a cult hero down there. Like they love him within the club. Like they think he's funny. Like whenever they do those interviews, like who's the funniest teammate, he's always brought up. Like
nice.
He's a bit quirky. He's got the big mullet, big tall bloke. And I just think he can be a real like cult figure going forward. A bit like how Essendon did that transfer from like Bell Chambers to Draper.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Witts, he obviously had a few injury over his time and whether he's going to finish up early and Moyle gets a bit more of a crack at it this year, but I don't know. He just looked a bit slow at times. He hasn't got much match experience, so I just very similar to Sam Draper early days. Like has a bit of raw X factor to him. Does some nice things, moves quite well around the ground. Like Draper's quite athletic and Moyle's quite athletic, but he just lacked that like experience that you see in the bigger bodied rucks.
Yeah. In your notes here, you've got Lukosius. What do you make of his game? He was playing forward.
Playing up forward. There was no Ben King in the side. The commentators said on it at one point, it was Casbolt, Chol and Lukosius, and they all sort of high-fived after a goal. And the commentators were like, this will likely be the starting 6. I can't remember who else was up there, but for round 1.
Yeah.
So they were the 3 talls. So I'd be interested. I think he's going to play forward time. He said it in the media a fair bit this year. Don't know what that does for his scoring, but he's only going to naturally improve as, he's a first-round draft pick 2.
Yeah, it's not going to be as fruitful as playing on halfback or the wing
type
type
he
thing.
Averaged in the high 80s a few years ago. I don't think we'll see that, but maybe 70s. Could be a very handy like Tim Membry type mid-sized forward who gets a bit of the ball up the ground.
He's going to be a gun in real football. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So hopefully it can translate to fantasy over the years. Moving on to the Bombers, Jai Caldwell played outside of the midfield, a bit on the wing, a bit more. So that's just interesting to note. I kind of like him better there than I like him as a tagger. So he might be a little bit better. Like, there's a chance of him averaging, say, 80 in that role as opposed to probably playing a tagging accountable role as he did at the end of last season. So just something to keep our eyes on this weekend. Will Setterfield was given a decent run in the midfield. In your notes here, you noticed that Dylan Shiel wasn't in the midfield rotation as much.
No, I think I looked at the CBAs just before, after watching the game, and Setterfield was like 70% and Shiel was maybe like 40%.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to continue going forward?
I don't know whether they just lacked a bit of height because Zach Merritt's not the tallest. And Parrish isn't the tallest,
huge, yeah.
and yeah, they just maybe wanted to try that height through the midfield. It's something they haven't had, and I mean they used to chuck Stringer through the midfield a little bit. Obviously he's injured.
Yeah,
don't know whether they just wanted to try Setterfield. He could have also been tagging. I couldn't really pick it up on the coverage. It was so hard to follow, but
yeah,
I mean we know what Setterfield's capable of.
We saw at the end of last year.
Has played so many different roles over his years. But yeah.
Archie Perkins, he looked real classy.
He's another one who spent a fair bit of time in the midfield.
Yeah, didn't get huge midfield numbers, but it was that perfect balance of like midfield and forward that you really wanted for him to maintain your forward status. But it just looks like he probably could score anywhere on the ground. You know, playing either like when he plays forward, he does push up pretty high. He does push up to the contest as well. That kind of plays as a fifth midfielder when he's not in there. And then sometimes gets into that rotation where he gets a few CBAs. Definitely saw a few more centre bounce attendances in the back end of last year. So, yeah, he's one I really like as a forward this year. There's a real breakout potential there and just might even overtake a few of their more senior players as well this season. So, he's one I really like. What do you make of Massimo D'Ambrosio?
I really liked him at the back end of last year. He's got one of the best legs in the AFL.
Yeah.
Like, so underrated. And he's just so good at like picking the play out of halfback. He's playing a bit further up the ground this year.
Yeah, played more forward. I think he's listed as a forward in fantasy this year.
Yeah, I saw him sort of like on the wing a fair bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time he had the ball in his hands, he just picked out players, and he's so good at like that long 50-metre accurate kick.
Yeah, he does have a good leg. It's just I hope he plays off that half back and not up forward. That's the issue. Cole Langford still getting some time on the wing, and he's listed as a forward. So I just thought that was interesting because we kind of talked about that. Warnie and I talked about that in the preseason podcasts, the team analysis podcasts about what his role might be. And yeah, look to like still perhaps be on the wing with Nick Martin kind of on there as well, along with a few others. But yeah, as a forward option, he might be pretty handy. Someone who's going to slide a bit in drafts, I think, as well. Jai Menzies was a player that looked good. He impressed me out there. I just don't think he's going to be a big scorer in his role.
He's a real burst player.
Yeah.
And especially with the new sub rule and how that's going to work, he could be a bit dangerous with just coming on in the last quarter.
Yeah.
Because he is the sort of guy who can kick like 3 goals in 3 minutes. And he's very like a bit like a Ratio Fantasia, just fades in and out of games, but very snappy when he's on.
Yeah.
So.
What did you make of the ruck situation with Essendon? Like, so who's looking like number one ruck? Do you think Draper's still in front?
Split it between everyone. It was real crook, actually. I thought Draper, all pre-season, I've been sort of snagging Draper in a lot of drafts, thinking he's ready to take that next step. But Draper only played I think it was like the second half.
Yeah.
And they used Phillips I think it was about a 30-30-30 split, like almost like.
Yeah.
But
it was weird, wasn't it?
Phillips played most of the first half, and then Brian sort of did most of the backup rucking.
Yeah.
And Draper played the second half. And I was just like, why is Andrew Phillips in the mix? I would have just, if I was Brad Scott, just penciled Sam Draper as your number one, being so young and such an X factor, and have Nick Bryan as your number 2 coming through. I just couldn't really work it out. Maybe it was just because it was a practice game.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it just gave us no indication as to who, like, how Draper's going to, we all want to know how Draper's going to go, and it really gave us no further
I didn't think he was carrying an injury. I haven't seen anything. He's been at training. Like, I just don't know why they warmed him into half a game. He could have easily played a full one, but
yeah, I don't know.
Who knows what was going on?
Anyways, I don't think anything. We've covered everything for that game. We'll move on to North Melbourne versus Richmond. Start with North Melbourne. The big one, Cam Zurhaar, basically midfield the whole game. Cunnington didn't play, but what do you make of that?
He's still going to be needed up forward. Like he's too good up forward. But yeah, he has that dusty mould to him as well, where he can be used as such a clearance player. Like he's such a bull around the ball. So
absolutely.
He can be used for just like spurts in the midfield, just to win clearances.
We might just see a bit more of him in the midfield. We have seen it in the past. We've seen him on the half-back once, and he was really good. He can play multiple roles. It's just, you might be right. He might be too dangerous up forward.
Yeah, I mean, Clarko might have earmarked him as a good clearance player and given him some minutes, just test him out. But
he's definitely one to watch this weekend to see what happens. I reckon if he gets a similar type midfield run this weekend, say if Cunnington comes back in, he still does it. Or he might even rotate forward with Cunnington. That's the other thing as well. So just have a look what happens there in terms of that midfield mix and rotation. But he was definitely an interesting one. What do you make of Josh Goda's game? Big hype on the back of last year.
So many drafts, he's just gone so late. I've seen, obviously he had that, he's got an inflated average. So on a lot of like ADP boards and stuff like that, he's like pushed up. Just because of that massive average. But I was like, he's only playing like, I think it was 1 or 2 games.
Yeah,
so I was like,
don't Gold Coast when
you
no
just
one
write
cared.
it off. You're like, oh yeah, it's a cheeky rookie game. But man, he was like almost best on ground for me.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't know much about him. Like I hadn't looked into him too hard because I was like, oh, just another rookie game, and his price is inflated in classics. So like, don't research him too much.
Yeah.
And then, I had to look up his number on North playing list because I was like, this guy, I thought it was Bailey Scott to begin with.
Yeah.
I think he wore 28, and I was just like, geez, this guy is racking up off halfback and on the wings.
Yeah.
And he was like, not even just racking up the ball, like he was like sidestepping players. They're playing Richmond, so, he's sidestepping like Taranto and Dusty. Like, he's like just so classy.
I think Kays did a video for the live show and he had Josh Goater as one of his ones to watch this season. So
like almost to the point I'm like looking at him in Classic now. I think he'll be like a jet. Like he was probably like almost like a 20+ disposal game off halfback flank.
I think he was a good underage scorer as well, which isn't surprising if you watch him play. If you played that style of game as a junior when he was top dog of his class.
I genuinely had him on like as best on ground. Like
he was good. I enjoyed him. Yeah, and seeing him push up to that wing and kind of be a part of that midfield mix as well was kind of good to see as well. Harry Sheasel was impressive. He was very classy. He kicked a few goals.
2 goals in like the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, he was awesome. But like just that role as a forward, I'm just not sure of his output, especially playing for North Melbourne.
There's a lot of young kids at North as well. They're going to demand midfield time.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if Sheasel's ready. Like they might just give him those year or two up forward while, you've got Phillips and LDU and all these players, Tom Power, just demanding midfield minutes. There's not enough to go around. In
the match sim the week earlier, apparently played off halfback. I think a lot of people got excited about that. But that's when you're playing against your own reserves type thing or playing against yourselves. So, didn't see that this week, but looks classy as. Definitely worth picking up as a forward for the future, but he's probably going to go too early in your keeper league drafts.
I'd steer clear, to be honest. I think he's going to be overrated by a lot of people in your draft.
Might be good in like 4 or 5 years' time.
Yeah, but I mean,
he's going to go way too early.
In terms of the ratings, like he's quite up there, and I've seen him go quite early in a lot of those keeper drafts.
Yeah.
Knowing he's going to play forward for 2 years, I'd just be worrying about it. Someone who's going to get a fair bit of midfield time.
100% agree. Bit of a funny one that I didn't really expect, but Liam Shields got a run on the wing later on in the game. I just don't think he's going to play a lot of footy this year, but he's listed as a forward, so just want to keep an eye on this weekend if you can do a few things. But
Clarko obviously loves him. So.
Yeah, I just feel like he's just brought in for coaching kind of experience, not really to play, but I don't know what they were doing there, but that was just interesting to look at. I think that was it for North Melbourne for me. Have you got any other ones?
I put Jaden Stevenson down. I've been pretty big on him, pretty bullish on him.
He didn't look too bad, did he?
I've got him in quite a few drafts I've done already just because I think he's so undervalued. I got him so late. Everyone's steering clear of him because he's obviously had issues. Like he crashed that bike last year, and they've been talks about he's had the gambling issue. He's had a few injuries.
Plus, like some of like the abysmal performances.
Like Kane Corns has roasted the shit out of him on like Footy Classified about like his work rate. But I just think Clarko's the perfect coach for him.
Probably.
Clarko's the man who's going to get the most out of him because when he is on, he is an X factor. Like he's such a game breaker. Can easily have like 25, 30 disposals, kick a few goals. And he was playing through the midfield a bit. He was around goals a bit. And I just think he'll get the best out of him this year and we'll see the best Jaden Stevenson we have yet. So,
well, I hope you're right because I've got him in a couple leagues. I think there'll be a few doubters out there for sure, Checkers.
The one bit that really I put down in my notes because he took the ball from the middle of the ground, took 2 running bounces, running to just inside 50, and old Jaden Stevenson would have just burst away, kicked it behind, gone for goal. But there was like 3 North Melbourne players just on the short. He's taken 2 running bounces, could have easily been the hero kick to goal, and he pulled up and kicked the short kick to.
Clarko might be in his head.
And
then.
I was like, geez, that's not Jaden Stevenson like. That's very unselfish. So I don't know. He could just be a change player. He didn't have a pre-season last year. Because obviously he was injured. Like what did he do to his hip or whatever. So full pre-season could help.
I guess another one to talk about is the ruck situation. So I guess Tristan Cherry was the number 1 for most of the game. Coleman Jones went in there a bit. He
didn't look too flash, Coleman Jones, to be honest. I don't know. They chased him a little bit. He showed so much promise at Richmond, but I don't know. I think Edwards playing. Did he? I seem to remember him being in there at some stage, but it could have been when the reserves came, and I can't really remember. Cherry definitely looked the number 1. Charlie Coleman was drafted as a ruckman, but he was playing forward, wasn't he? Yeah, I think he's going to play purely as a forward as well because they've noticed. I think if you look through the stats, Larky's one of the most targeted full forwards in the whole league in terms of players going to the forward 50. He's their only option. So just to have a second tall down there to take a bit of heat off Larky will help. And that might mean, I don't know where Goldstein's at, but if Cherry doesn't have to play those forward roles, it might be pretty good for him as well. And I mean, I call him Chom. Chomben. Charlie. Chomben. Oh, Chomben. Chomben, he kicked a few goals and he kicked a few goals in the practice match. He's been noted in the VFL kicking a few bags of 6. He's just very good at getting on the scoreboard. Not going to be massive fantasy numbers. He doesn't rack up a lot of the ball, but he's easily good for 2 or 3 goals a game.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Phillips and Powell, Tom Powell, that is, they had plenty of midfield time. Who was your pick of the two?
Tom Powell, the better option.
Yeah.
I didn't really notice Phillips too much. He was around the midfield a lot, but he wasn't getting a lot of the ball.
Yeah.
And Tom Powell just looked more damaging with it. I think he'll get more of a role.
Yep.
There was photos getting around all pre-season of Powell and his ripped ass, like so shredded, and I was like, this guy's in second year.
Yeah, I think I was tagged in a pipe photo of the guns.
Yeah,
so
massive
looks
pipes,
pretty good.
and he looked like a player in his 5th or 6th year. So,
well, that was good to see then. Yeah, keep your eye on those two though, because I think they're both probably in for a decent role at some stage. Anyway, both kind of earmarked for midfield roles. So, yeah, could see a lot of them this season. Moving on to Richmond, one that I found interesting was Judson Clark playing on the wing a lot in the first half. Marlon Pickett was out. That's one thing to note. He usually pretty much runs along that wing all day, so he probably will continue to do that next season. So I don't know if we can take too much out of it, but listed as a forward, if Judson Clark can kind of play in the midfield on the wing, yeah, that's kind of what we look for in our forwards, really. But yeah, just keep your eye on that one to see what happens this week because, yeah, just interesting signs there. Speaking of forwards, though, Trent Cotchin basically exclusively forward. Do you think that continues?
Yeah, I just don't know. I've looked at it a few times because he does slide down the draft ranks. Definitely because he's just aging and, playing forward. But I just don't know if his scoring is good enough to warrant picking him up as a midfielder that will get forward DPP.
Yeah. Nah.
I just don't know if you obviously know he's going to get that DPP.
The only hope I think is like he gains the DPP, someone gets injured in the midfield, say Hopper and Taranto both go down or something like that because it's not unusual. Last season they got injured type thing. He could have a few good weeks listed as a forward, but that's very wishful thinking.
Yeah, I think just as a forward, he's probably like a 55 average. Yeah, it's probably not warranted.
He's a pressure dude, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
He'll probably stop a halfback flanker from racking up all day, and he'll probably be very annoying when you come up against him, when one of your players comes up against him. But yeah, in terms of his own fantasy scoring, not loving it. Thompson Dow came into the centre bounce mix late in the game, but I think it was only the last quarter. Kind of tells me he's not quite in line for that one, but I think there's a few people interested in him out there. The Dow name made very famous by this podcast.
I'm going to put that in the same basket as Paddy, so
yeah,
not going to touch that one.
Any other players? Samson Ryan looked all right at forward. What did you make of that?
Yeah, Tom Lynch has got plantar fasciitis. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's quite a hard injury, especially as a big fella to get over. Like it could linger around, which is what I was thinking, and I was like, Samson Ryan they're going to need a tall down there. Jack Rewalt's not tall enough to play number one forward, and he's aging as well. So Samson Ryan looked pretty crazy. He reminded me of the King brothers. He's 200 centimeters tall. He's a ruck forward.
Yeah.
But as a full forward, like he's quite agile. Like he's a big, tall, skinny guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, had a good leap. He took a few contested grabs and just reminded me of like watching Ben King or Max King. So he's quite heavily selected in Classic, I know, as the ruck bench because of that. So yeah, if Tom Lynch's injury sticks around a little bit longer, I think Samson Ryan will get a few games.
Do you remember his average from last season?
Not really, but
-2.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a very famous debut. Looked out of place. I do admit he looked so much better in this game than we saw. We saw
it's more
last
just
year.
as soon as Tom Lynch comes back, you think he floats out of the team. But say that foot injury can be quite hard to get over. It was a tall that you can't train on it. It's just going to make it worse. Like could miss 10 weeks, and then you get Samson Ryan just filling your bench.
Well, I've realised I've missed a whole heap of players on my notes, so I better go back up. Jaden Short still played midfield, so that's worrying for people that are expecting that DPP status. Rioli actually looked the decent one out of defence. Hugo Rousmith looked pretty good as well, looked pretty comfortable back there, but Rioli was taking a lot of the kick-ins. Yeah,
Rioli was doing the kick-ins, and Rousmith's obviously got the speed. Like he's so quick. I think he won the halftime sprint last year at the GF. Like he's quick. So yeah, they both look great. I think they're both going to play that Hooley Short role we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
Jaden Short saw like 70% CBAs. So it was pure midfield. And he was very good at it too. Like he didn't look out of place alongside Taranto and Hopper and everyone else.
He didn't, but he definitely looked like third string, like the third go-to guy in there.
It's not the worst thing to have. He's a big kicker. I still think Jaden Short averages big, but I just think if you were banking on him getting that DPP back, a lot of people I've seen like just holding on, being like, oh, he's going to get defensive status at round 6 or whatever.
I think I had him ranked as like my 12th midfielder because I was banking on getting the top defender in the game, as your 12th midfielder type thing. But yeah, I don't think that's happening.
He hasn't trained down there at all,
and
just seeing him play full midfield just sort of confirmed it.
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing for owners, but because we saw his average really, go from 100 plus average to really being just a 90 guy really. So, yeah, bit disappointing, but he'll be okay. But it just won't be the best possible outcome for him, that's all. What else have I got in there? We've got Hugo Rasmussen talked about that. Yeah, I think that's the only one I missed. Anything else you want to add from that game, or are we good to move on?
No, good to move on. The next game's probably the most exciting one.
Yeah, definitely. Some good notes in this one. Carlton versus Collingwood is the game we're talking about. We'll start with Tom De Koning. So, he was the number one ruck and looked really comfortable, actually. So, Mark Pittner didn't play, but we know what Tom De Koning is actually capable of. We've seen him take big grabs up forward, pretty mobile around the ground. If Pittner plays, I know Pittner is technically the better hitter to advantage ruckman, apparently, and Carlton do rate him, but I think he's got a knee issue at the moment, so I don't know how long that's going to keep him out for. But if Tom De Koning is the number one ruck, cheeky chance of a breakout this year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of cash thrown about his name because obviously it's a contract year.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hype in like general footy, like TV and print media about Tom De Koning and his future prospects at AFL level. I never quite saw it. I thought he was just an athletic ruck, probably didn't have enough grunt to take over as a full-time ruck and probably didn't have enough forward craft to play as a full-time forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way he played in the weekend, sort of like he was pushing guys out of contests and, you know, tackling and hitting packs, which is the first time I've seen him really do that. He seemed quite like a part-time ruck, a part-time forward, but he looked comfortable up forward and he looked comfortable in the ruck. So that really sort of like confirmed. I hadn't seen it. I'd seen it in the print media and obviously like people like Kane Corns and Matty Lloyd pumping his tyres up a lot over the last couple of years. But just seeing him, like, he's put on a bit of size.
Yeah, he looks like
you know, you have those ruckmen like a Scott Lysett who's like very like thick and like aggressive, and then you have those ruckmen like Sam Draper who's quite athletic and doesn't get like hit a lot. But yeah, De Koning sort of like I thought he was like a Sam Draper, like, you know, doesn't get a lot of the contested ball, but he was hitting a lot of blokes and hitting a lot of contests in good ways, not in like tribunal type ways.
Not getting suspended.
But yeah, no, he was getting contested footy, so it was good to see.
Yeah, I thought he was great. So yeah, if he's number one ruck, yeah, the sky's the limit. It's just whether they play two and it hinders him. We'll have to wait and see. Oliver Holland, as a rookie, was given a lot of time on the wing. He looked good, looked classy. I think it's going to be him and Lockie O'Brien fighting out for that spot. Blake Acres seems to have the other wing sewn up, but it's something that they really targeted in the off-season was outside runners, and it's good to see them chuck a young wingman like Holland's in, and just give him a bit of a crack straight up. So I think he's looking the good. So he
looked up to scratch. Yeah, he was around the ball a lot as well. Yeah. I don't know if his scoring would be massive on the wing, but as someone who's going to get a lot of game time early in the season as a rookie price player, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of rookies, I guess Lockie Cowan was given a good run on the halfback flank. He's probably my favourite player. Well, one of the favourite players in the draft. Halfback flank, he was a good underage scorer. He's kind of... Zach Williams is out for the season, we know that, but he's kind of competing with Nick Newman for a spot. I think Newman might be slightly ahead, but I don't think it would take too long for Cowan to actually get his debut.
And Newman's quite prone to an injury.
That's true. So, yeah. And the other one, speaking of halfback flank, is Alex Simcoto did some nice things off halfback flank. Was I think he only got signed up last week. So
yeah, he's a Carlton VFL player. So obviously, sometimes you see this. I think Dan Brosio was a Essendon VFL player from memory.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. Yeah,
and I reckon Jai Newcomb was a Hawthorn VFL player.
Okay, yeah.
So usually when we see these mid-season or like pre-season supplement picks come out of the VFL side, they know the system. They're pretty prone to getting games early on in the piece. Because they don't have to learn the system. They train with all the boys. They fit in, gel in already.
Yeah.
I'd be earmarking for some early games because of that.
It's unfortunate that the same thing didn't happen to the Trudge last season. So
yeah.
But anyway, we won't go there. I think Dossie and Kays are still getting over that one. I think that's why they're not doing the podcast this year. Actually, they just don't. They just can't take not talking about the Trudge anymore. He moved to Box Hill actually, so there might be a chance. Any other players? You've got Sard here in your notes.
Sard on my notes. Just because I have him in a few keeper leagues, and he's been one that's sort of on that border of like, do I turf or do I keep? Because I think he averaged 79 or 80 last year, which was probably one of his better returns.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he looked really good. Zach Williams out the side, Sard just took over.
I like him a lot better without Zach Williams, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, not that Zach Williams played a shitload of footy last year, but Sard just, he kicks, he runs. He just looked like he'd taken a spring in his step, like his game went to another level. So, I don't know. He could be one that averages almost 90. I had sort of pushed him up a little bit. So, I've put him in my keeper list in a lot of leagues after that.
Yeah, no, don't mind that one. Moving on to Collingwood. I know this guy's 2G, 4P, but Tom Mitchell, I guess everyone's talking about him really. Just spent a lot of time up forward in the first half anyway. They seemed to prefer forward line from the CBA and then kind of play midfield from there. The reason why I'm saying this is because like people might be in the classic world might be turfing him out of their sides.
Yeah.
But in a keeper league, we know that it's purely goes on starting position. So if he's starting forward and then rolling into the midfield, very good chance of getting forward status at some stage. And that whilst that might hinder his 100 plus average, if he can get forward status and be a 90-plus forward, you're going to take that every day of the week.
Nick Dacos saw about 50% midfield time, and I just don't know if he keeps that just yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
He trained with the midfield a little bit in pre-season, but I just feel like they might have been a little bit overinflated. They gave him a little bit of an extra run in the midfield.
Yeah. No, I just feel on the classic hype, people are going to be writing him off, Tom Mitchell off this week a bit, and you might be able to pounce.
I'll just watch another game. I can't imagine it's too bad. He's still... What he's done in the past is crazy.
Yeah.
The only thing that has worried me a little bit around Mitchell is Collingwood have shown they're not afraid to play their best midfield at times. They're happy to... they put Degoe in the midfield even though he was a forward. They put Jack Crisp in the midfield even though he was playing defence.
And really, they're not a fantasy-friendly side anymore either.
I feel like they play a fantasy-friendly footy, but I'm just thinking that midfield, they're not like... You would think they'd put like natural midfielders in there, but they're happy to put Crisp in there because he fills the role they need. They're happy to put Degoe in there because he's really good at doing clearances. It's like at times Tom Mitchell's been very good at racking up the footy, but his role for the team, he hasn't been a great, clearance player. He hasn't used the ball fantastically. He's a massive handballer.
He's more the in and under handball out type thing.
Just don't know
a few
if
tackles when his shoulders okay.
He's like his role in the team is exactly what they need. So I just don't know if he fits the gel at times. He might.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play that. He's not going to get a heap of touches like he used to. That's for sure. But still could average 90 pretty comfortably. And all I'm saying, if he gets
forward status and averages 90 though, that's
exactly
top 5 forward.
Wait and see what happens this week if he's spending a bit more time up forward again. Could be an interesting one. We'll talk about the Dacoses before. So Josh Dacos was definitely back out on the wing a lot more. CBA is at the end of last year, which kind of got a lot of people excited because he was putting up some really good scores. But Nick Dacos probably just going to take him off him this year. And I think it's going to drop him back to being like that kind of 75, 80 average wingman.
Yeah, he played a lot on the wing.
Yeah, so I just...
Not horrible, but
just plays his role. That's the thing, like a lot of Collingwood players do. We'll talk about the big man situation. This ties in rucks, but Dan McStay was really good up forward, kicked a few goals. He didn't do much backup rucking, which I thought he'd be doing a lot more of this season. Cox played in the ruck more, and we know that Cameron's come off that limited, or the last few weeks of a modified program. So he didn't do as much rucking as Cox did, but I think that's just purely being injured in the preseason. My thoughts on this one is really can they play, or do they need to play Cox come the main season if Cameron's fit, McStay's fit, you've got Frampton in defence who can he did roll into the ruck at the end of this game. And then Mycheck's going to come back in, so it's another tool to play on the forward line. Are they going to roll with 3 or 4 players that are kind of ruck standard?
Cox looked good though, and it's weird because I feel like Cox got a bit of confidence in his game now in the ruck. He's been tossed up forward a lot of his career, hasn't had a lot of chance to go in the ruck, and sort of late last year you got that extended period where he got a few games where he got a good goal at it.
Yeah.
And he just looked to have some confidence in there in this game. And I had my notes that I was like, Cox did a lot of the ruck work, and with no Grundy there, he should be the sole number 2 ruck.
Yeah.
And because he is versatile, can play forward, can play ruck, I don't know. And so is Cameron. They're so versatile tools. They don't have a defined ruck.
I wouldn't even play forward rucks, can't they?
Wouldn't even be surprised come round 10 you see Darcy Cameron play 40-60 ruck just because they're just swapping shit around. Everyone's so versatile there. Cox and McStay and Cameron.
Yeah, fair enough. I do kind of agree with a lot of that. So, maybe I'm just not liking Darcy Cameron as much as I did earlier on in the piece.
Just that limited time.
Yeah.
You'll see him again pick up some minutes this week, hopefully.
Just looking at rookies, Jacob Ryan, really good underage scorer in the Sandford under-18s. He got a run in the second half on the halfback flank and did some nice things. Don't know if he's in the best 22 straight up, but he's one to watch for the future. Ed Allen had a run as well, actually, but he's one I liked in the draft.
Ed Allen came on at half-time, was it? Yeah.
Didn't do he had a lot of touches early when he first came on, but then kind of tapered off a little bit. So, but he's one I like for the future as well. You got Darcy Cameron written in your notes.
Darcy Moore,
sorry.
Yeah.
I really like this one, actually. But you go.
Well, it's real keeperly relevant. Not so much classic or anything like that. Not so much, But, Darcy Moore is a captain. He's obviously in the best 22 every week now. He's got the confidence behind him. And he was playing like a captain. He was, he was everywhere down back. He was slapping blokes on the arse and, just getting around everyone. So I just think he'll get his best footy this year. We have had some injuries in the past. And a couple of years ago, he averaged high 70s, taking a lot of intercept marks. He's going to be around the ball. He's going to be, everyone's going to be looking to him as the captain.
Yeah.
Cross kicking across half, the back lines. The Collingwood are really good at doing that, and that's where we saw Jack Crisp and Jeremy Howe rack up massive numbers. I feel like Darcy Moore is now going to be involved in a lot of that sort of stuff. And
I think couple all that as well with a fair few kick-ins here and there too. So generally gets a few extra, plus threes in that regard too. So
the other note I had put down that sort of helps it is like the addition of Billy Frampton.
Yeah.
So Frampton was playing like very deep back because Frampton's not the quickest bloke, so he couldn't really push up the ground as much, which means more how we're pushing up the ground quite a lot.
Yeah.
And leaving Frampton to play in the goal square 1-on-1 deep forward. So where that lets Moore, get out a little bit and get a lot of that ball on the halfback, the cross kicking, which is like where they rack up like 10, 15 marks a game, rack up, 16, 17 kicks a game. We might see those sort of like piggish numbers we've seen from Jeremy Howe in the past.
Yeah, I don't mind that one actually. Yeah, so all those points actually kind of leads to probably some fantasy potential there. So don't mind that one at all. All right, I'll just stop the recording for a sec. I'm just going to put the Manscaped ad in here so I don't have to do it later. Play through that, and then we'll move on to the next game. Hey listeners, just interrupting the podcast here. Autumn is in the air and the leaders in below the waist grooming are here to make sure that your foliage isn't the only thing shedding its excess leaves this season. Make sure to trim your bush with the best and let Mother Nature do the rest. Join 8 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code KEEPER20. Remember, that's 20% off and free shipping with the code KEEPER20. And remember, when you trim the weeds, the tree always stands a little bit taller. All right, moving on to the next game, Sydney versus Brisbane. So a few players that stood out for Sydney. Had a lot of outs. Didn't play that well for Sydney either, but Dylan Stephens stood out early in the game to me. Did some nice things on the wing and pushed forwards for a few shots at goal as well. Pretty similar to the role he played last year. I'm just not convinced he'll be an accumulator just yet, just playing on that wing role. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Sydney got they had so many players out. It was crook. It was one of the crookest games to watch out of the whole week. One, because the microphones were unbearable. Yeah. So I could barely watch the first half. Like, it was like so hard to keep up with. The camera work was pretty average. Sydney were playing like a lackluster side. There's a few names out of Brisbane as well. I didn't have much interest in it. But yeah, I think Dylan Stephens probably isn't quite the 100 averaging fan. His junior numbers weren't incredible.
I think they're in the high 70s, low 80s.
Yeah, so he's a good ball user and he feels a good role, but he's not like a fantasy
quality of a quantity type, really. Yeah, that's my thoughts on him. That's kind of why I traded him throughout the preseason. He wasn't going to make my best 16, so I do enjoy watching him play. I just don't know if the fantasy game's going to be there. That's all. Braden Campbell seemed to be in defence, kind of in that Nick Blakey spot. He could play round one, but just didn't do a lot. I didn't notice him a lot in this game. So.
No, I didn't see a lot of him. And I mean, Blakey could also be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's saying that. I really need to know because I've got to lock in my keepers.
Yeah, it'd be handy. I've got him in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, so. Matt Roberts, he got a few CBAs. There's been a lot of talk about him in the preseason. Spent some time on the wing as well. Like, didn't do heaps, but when he did have it, he didn't look out of place, really. So kind of like Stevens, kind of really, but probably not as... didn't play as well. But, just looked like he could actually play a few games this year depending on midfield depth and stuff like that. Yes, there's a few players
it's going to depend on like injuries and things like that because, there's going to be a lot of midfielders to come back into that Sydney side. Didn't
look too far off. Not quite best 22 just yet, but not too far away. I guess the big story for a lot of people, especially in the classic world looking for bench ruckman or cheaper ruckman, Lachlan McAndrew just rucked all day in place of injured teammates Tom Hickey and Peter Laddams. I reckon he really held his own in there against Brisbane. He played, Oscar McInerney in there. So I reckon he could be a round one starter and could earn some good experience this season, I think. What are your thoughts?
I still think Laddams, Hickey and McLean.
Yeah, when they're fit.
Plus Sam Reid if he's fit as well.
Yeah.
It's just he could find himself very far behind the pecking order very quickly. He might get a game or two very early.
Yeah.
But I guess sometimes... In the classic fantasy game, you don't really want your ruckman to be that bench ruckman to maybe be coming in later in the season when your on-field ruckman cops an injury.
Yeah.
So you don't want the guy that's going to play the first game and then not play again for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I just think more so as like a stash option for the future. I reckon once he retires, I guess I think Laddams is probably the future, but I think he's got a knee issue at the moment as well, or something's going on with Laddams. So I don't know. I think he could just get some valuable experience this year and might be held in better stead, 2 or 3 years down the track.
Push him up the rookie ruckman list a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't even rank him. So, got to get him in there after next weekend when I redo my ranks. What anything else you saw in this game?
That's just Sydney will lack a lot of names. Errol Goulden played a lot of midfield minutes.
Yeah.
And I know he's been pretty popular in draft. I think I did a draft on Sunday, and someone took him at pick 9.
Jeez, okay.
In a keeper, so
yep, big raps.
which sort of blew me away a little bit. But I guess if you watch that game, I guess it might have given you a little bit of confidence. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you can take too much out of that though, given the outs. But anyways, moving on to Brisbane, who were really impressive in this game. Just a few players, I guess, that had a bit of interest in the preseason or that stood out. So Devin Robertson, he played forward for a lot of the game, but went into the midfield later. It was just a pretty similar Devin Robertson kind of performance. I think we're all still holding on to hope that he produces those underage numbers, but
you need to see him traded, I think.
Yeah,
you need to see him go back home to West Coast, and you'll fill out and bloody have a ripper. But
yeah, they're not going to happen at Brisbane, so we're just going to have to keep waiting, I think. I think people got excited because he was on the wing a lot in the finals and stuff like that, but didn't really get that same role. Because on the wings, like, they rotated so many players. So this included, Connor McKenna, Darcy Wilmot, Jimmy Tunstall, Jared Berry, Harry Sharp. These are all guys that kind of they played on the right throughout the game.
Connor McKenna coming back really hurts Dev Robertson's chances, I reckon.
And it's really hard to say who's going to be there round 1 because I think a few of those guys could push onto a halfback flank as well, which kind of has a flow-on effect for the next guy I want to talk about, and that's Cam Rayner. So I only really noticed him in the second half. I'm not even sure if he was on the first half. I'm not 100% sure. But when he was in defence in that second half, he looked really comfortable back there. It's got better as the game went on, I think, as well. And even took some kick-ins. I think Daniel Rich might have come off and he kind of took over in a very similar role. So, yeah, Cam Rayner, yet to see whether he
played a bit of match sim down back.
Yeah,
so
he
I had
did,
that in my notes.
Yeah.
Like before I watched the game, it's just to keep an eye on Cam Rayner because I just want to see how he looked down back. He's forward. Up forward, you can write him off as a fantasy player.
Yeah.
I don't think he's got the engine, especially with Dunkley coming into Brisbane, to ever be a full-time midfielder now.
Yeah.
So, not that it's a last roll of the dice, but it's a good roll of the dice for Brisbane to just try him as a defender, and he's obviously got good leg on him. So
if it happens, because he's on the verge of my 16 keepers, really, if it happens again this weekend, I reckon he's kind of pushing for a spot in my side. So, yeah. He's one to kind of, I guess, owners who have been holding him for a long time, especially through the knee injury and stuff like that. I reckon they're starting to get a little bit excited, but we'll have to see what happens. Charlie Cameron was classy, always is. Only kicked the 1 goal. I always love having him in there because he's just a good streamer option in keep league sides. Picking up super late, kicks a bag of 3 or 4, and he generally scores around the 90.
Genuinely pretty consistent scoring wise. Minimum like 60, maximum 90, but it's just that like flat line
somewhere
all year. It's not too roller coastery.
Yep. Kadane Coleman. I know he should have really broken out last year, and it really happened. It's just a few injury-affected games and stuff bring his average down. But he's probably going to break out this season, I think. Just his attack out of defence is just incredible. Like an amazing leg, and like kicked a couple goals, I think, from on the run.
He gets up and down the ground so well.
I think he probably could have kicked 4 if he kicked straight. So just the way he moves out of defence, and he kind of has a license to just attack and do what he wants. So yeah, he's one I think is just going to go to a next level this season. Another value player is Jack Gunston. So he looked at home in the forward line, kicked a few goals as well. He's just going to slide in drafts given his age because no one's going to want to own him because he's probably near retirement age. But he represents value for what he can produce. He's probably going to be the third banana, not going to get as much attention as the other two up there. But a lot of value in Jack Gunston, and we know what he can produce in the past.
He said in the media last week that he reckons he can play 3 more years, so that gives you a little bit more confidence for keeper leagues. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I just think the output's still going to be decent if you can get on the end of a few goals. And looked, I don't know, just an experienced player. Just doesn't look out of place in that Brisbane side. Zach Bailey, he's still got some CBAs, which surprised me. There wasn't too many midfielders missing out of that mid-side as well. So there might still be hope for Zach Bailey owners out there, given he's got forward status as well. And just one last thing, which is stating the obvious, but Will Ashcroft is going to be a star.
Yeah, I think that's pretty locked in. I think classic-wise, he's the most selected player, and it's for good reason. So
absolutely.
Should be a pretty good year.
Yeah. Anything else you noticed in this game?
No, that was it. It was just the worst game ever to watch. Don't think I've ever watched a worse game of football.
Yeah.
Not because of the football quality, but just the coverage.
Yeah. I think one of the commentators apologised on Twitter afterwards, I think.
Yeah, they kept bringing it up. But it was more like the microphones out, water in them. Like,
it was disgusting.
I was like, oh, Christ.
Anyways, this is the only game I didn't watch. Actually, no, I said I didn't watch a second, but I did watch some of it. St Kilda versus Melbourne, because it was on after when I got home from work on Friday. What'd you take? I know you watched it because you're a St Kilda man. What'd you take out of this game?
Yeah, Melbourne favourites for the flag, probably.
Yeah, right.
They're nuts. They've added Brodie Grundy and they've added Lockie Hunter, and they haven't really lost much. So
yeah, true.
It's crazy how they've done that. And I mean, I watched the Stan documentary a couple of months ago as well about that draft period, the trade period.
Yeah.
And just, I think it was a bit where Brodie Grundy's manager's ringing the Melbourne list manager, and I think Goody's on the phone as well.
Yeah.
And Goody's just laughing. He's like, "You're telling me we're getting Brodie Grundy?" He's like, "Yes, done."
Do it.
Like, you just can't believe it. That Max Gawn and Brodie Grundy are going to play together, and it's going to be nuts to watch. It's going to be very hard to come up against.
Yeah.
Rowan Marshall rucked against them all day. He did it right, but I mean, fantasy-wise, it was probably only like a 50-score game for him.
Yeah.
Because you just can't compete against those two all day. They're nuts.
Yeah.
The one thing I noted about Melbourne with that is that they're going to have a lot of rotations up forward now. Grundy or Gawn are going to play a bit of forward time. I think Gawn's probably going to play more forward time, even though on the weekend Gawn saw most of the ruck.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, DVP is going to be crazy.
I did see some backyard stats for this game. Someone taking them. Didn't include tackle numbers, apparently, but Gawn was in the 90s, and I think Grundy was in the 50s. So make of that what you will, fantasy-wise, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen Gawn go up forward in the past and do
True.
all right.
Yep.
Kicks a few snags. So if he gets DPP, it could be pretty wild for a lot of draft leagues. If you sometimes have a pretty half decent ruck on the bench, you can float him in.
Anything else?
Lockie Hunter was nuts. He had shaved his head.
Nice.
Looks about 40 years old, and he was wearing a jumper that was like
40 years old since I've shaved mine. Or what?
I didn't know he was, to be honest. So I was like, what the hell? I thought it was like a VFL player.
There's actually a few people like that. Jared Berry, he's got rid of his hair as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, what the hell?
But his jumper was like a size too big for him. But he was best on ground. Like, he was everywhere, all along the wings.
Yeah.
And I feel like a couple of seasons ago, he was averaging high 90s at Bulldogs and was like a lock in everyone's team, especially if he had forward DPP.
Yeah.
And he was just like up and down the wings all day. He kicked a couple goals. And I think the new club is just like a massive breath of fresh air for him. Like,
it's the new club.
It's a new start. He's had a few things go wrong in the last few years. Obviously, he was like a vice captain, crashed his car, drink driving, fucking fair bit going on. But yeah, fresh start at a club that's like premiership favourite. Like, he's going to be up and about.
I always say new club rule, it's science. You perform better when you go to a new club.
The only thing is, I mean, what does that mean for like guys like James Jordan, Tommy Sparrow, Tomlinson, Langdon, like the guys who play on that like wing and flanks?
I think Langdon's fine. I think the others, they're really going to struggle as a result. That's all.
Cozzy Pickett got a bit of midfield time. I don't know how much to read into it because I looked at the CBAs and stuff. I mean, Viney only played about 40% in the midfield, and I feel like Viney's probably most weeks going to be the most CBAs.
Yeah.
Like, he's normally an out-and-out midfielder, so love to see it, but I feel like Cozzy's too dangerous around goal as well to see too much CBA during the actual season.
100% agree.
But yeah, just flag that one. Petrarca looked unreal.
Yeah.
No one's lost anything. Oliver looked unreal. So yeah, Melbourne were crazy damaging.
What about the Saints?
Nasai Wanganeen, Malira.
Yep.
Playing down back. Very similar like Coleman. Just great ball use. Running up. Very good run and carry.
Class player.
Reminded me of like a young Brad Hill, but with better foot skills.
Yep.
So.
No, I really like him for the future, for sure. Especially if he's playing a defence, because he was on the wing a lot last year. So
he was running out of half-back, which is pretty
awesome
handy.
To see.
I put a tweet up early in the season saying Mason Wood's probably pretty likely to play up forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, not that a lot of people were that keen on Mason Wood, but he did average like not high 90s.
No, he was good last year as a forward.
But in his last 5 or 6 games of the year, like he really solidified his wing role and was averaging well. Zane Cordy played full forward, and Mason Wood played his wing role. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. He was definitely sliding drafts as a result of that. So,
I think with all the injuries at Saints, like this crazy amount of injuries, like Machito Owens was playing up forward.
Yep.
Zane Cordy. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit going wrong up there for St Kilda. Ross Lyon, I've seen in a lot of drafts, a lot of St Kilda players sliding because they're just worried about that Ross Lyon factor.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice it too much. I thought they played a pretty similar game style to last year.
Yeah.
I've seen in a lot of fresh drafts, Brad Crouch slide well down the order, like being taken as one of the last top tier midfielders.
Yeah.
But he saw heaps of CBAs, looked back to just what he was doing last year. Like he averaged in high 100, 105, 106.
Yeah, right. He's missing... Oh, it doesn't really matter because it's more classic, but he's missing round 1, isn't he? I just heard that on the weekend, so I forgot about that. But yeah, it doesn't really matter for our format because we've got him for years to come. What about Mateus Philippou? I heard a few
He was
things about
handy.
him.
I didn't notice him too much.
Yeah. I think it was when I turned it on, he kicked a couple goals.
Yeah, he was sort of good on that half forward line.
Yeah.
There's a couple of times he like crossed the ball in and out with the forward line, and his foot skills are pretty good.
Do you think he's in line for round 1?
Yeah, I'd say he's in line, especially with Billings going down now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He's probably improved his chances a fair bit, but I just don't know one, if he sees like massive game time, he probably won't see many midfield minutes.
Yeah,
He
more
probably plays
forward.
more on the half-forward flank.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's scoring-wise. Like, don't expect massive things.
One I like for the future, though, for sure, given his underage performances. Yeah, all right, we'll move on to the Fremantle versus Adelaide game, getting towards the end here. Jaeger O'Meara, he had bulk midfield minutes and look back to his best fantasy-wise, I think. I reckon he'll be a 90-plus average midfielder, no worries this year. So I think owners of him, are going to be pretty happy. Probably unlucky a little bit, didn't get forward status in the end, but oh well. He's going to be a good midfielder for the owners that have held on to him anyway. Speaking of midfielders, Liam Henry was playing on a wing. He was quiet though, and I think O'Driscoll comes back and takes his place when he's fit. So, but I think a lot of people are just kind of waiting for him to bust out on that wing. Just don't know if he's going to have win enough of the footy really to be
Yeah,
a
he
good
didn't win a
scorer.
lot of the footy. He used the footy well.
Yeah, that's what he does.
Like, he was real good going inside 50, but just wasn't racking up touches.
Nat Fyfe, he was pretty dangerous up forward, got to say. Just probably not going to have that huge fantasy ceiling that he used to have. But I still think he could go close to the 80 mark when he gets on top, when Freo get on top of a few teams and he's hit up in that forward line. I don't know, he just doesn't kick well at goal as well. So they should get more +6.
Yeah, he's got that Dangerfield factor to it.
Yeah.
I put in my notes writing Nat Fyfe off.
You
I
don't
was
like
like,
him?
I think he's done. His career's done. He's not going to see midfield time.
No, that's for sure. I agree
Like,
with that.
he's nowhere near the midfield rotation.
You don't think an 80 average could happen?
No,
playing up forward?
I'm thinking we're more looking like a 55,
Okay,
60 average.
yeah, okay.
So I know he might still have a little bit of value if you've got him in draft. So if you can flick him off and get something back for him, might be a good time to do it. But yeah.
I'm holding on to hope. I reckon he could, like, if everything goes his way, that 80 is probably his max. But I think he should be a 70 plus if he goes all right. Because I still think when things aren't working for him, they might try him in the middle and things like that. So they could just
I just
get
don't know if
kicks.
things will not work for him. They got O'Meara added. They've got all these young kids coming through.
True. Yeah, maybe.
I've written him off fantasy-wise completely now.
Yeah. We'll move on to Neil Erasmus and Matthew Johnson. They only came on, I think, in the 5th period, and I think I stopped watching pretty much after they came on, but probably not great for their round one hopes, but I think both those players are definitely stash options for the future. Sam Sturt, he's listed as a forward, but he rode up to the wing a bit as well
Yeah,
throughout
he
this
was
game.
higher up the ground, and I think I was watching at the time. I was like, he's got a bit of Blake Acres about him because he's taller.
Yeah.
Drafted as like a key forward, really.
Yeah.
So he's got the height that Blake Acres sort of provided on that wing. They had Henry with the speed on one wing, and sort of Sam Sturt had the height that we've seen maybe with like a Bergman at Port or something like that. You know, the taller winger.
Yeah, for sure. Any other players you like in this game?
Matt Tabner kicked, I think it was like 3 goals in the first 10 minutes of the game. And I remember last year I put it, not promoting gambling, but put a little bit of money on him for the Coleman early on. And I thought he was good
value, but got injured.
Good value, yeah, he got injured. And I just looked him up, watching the game. I was like, geez, Tabner's due. He's 29, I think, almost 30. But if Fremantle have added a lot to their team, they're obviously in finals contention, probably top 4 contention.
Yeah.
He kicked 12 goals in the first 4 games last year, so that's an average of 3 goals a game. He kicked 29 goals in the first 9 games of 2021 before he got injured.
Yeah.
It's an average of 3 goals a game. So if you just bank on him not getting injured this year, I looked at like 3 goals a game, 22 games. That's like a 66 goal year.
Yeah.
Which puts him on par to win a Coleman. And as we know, like the Coleman medal winner the last few years averaged like mid-70s, high mid-80s.
Yep.
So if Tabner stays fit,
I loved him before he got
he's
injured.
very good at hitting the
Yeah,
scoreboard.
yeah.
Like so good at just kicking goals.
He was that player that I loved to draft. It's just that he became too injury prone to worry about. But if he
I
can
was
stay
saying
fit,
this year could be his year.
Hopefully.
The way that Fremantle added to their team, he's got Fife around him. He'll have Luke Jackson around him a bit, take a little bit of heat off him. So yeah, he'd probably kick a few big bags.
Any other players?
Sarong was crazy wild.
Yeah.
Like looked next level. Hayden Young looked next level. So if you got them, bloody stash them away and don't trade them for
2G,
anything.
4P though.
And then Bailey Banfield was one I've just put down because he was a sub 10 times last year for Fremantle.
Yeah.
But he played the full game, kicked a few goals, and I looked him up. He kicked 4 goals last year against the Lions when he played a full game.
Yeah.
And I think in his first year in the system, he played a full year as well. So I think he might play like 20 games in his debut year. Then he's had a few years of injury. He has had a few years of being the sub. So yeah, I don't know. He's young. If he cracks in the side, could be pretty handy. He's looked just zippy, just very like zippy around goals. So
Yep. No, he's definitely been shown glimpses in the past. So yeah, not the worst option. Moving on to the Crows. Ben Keys was out of the midfield mix. Spent some time forward. Just don't think that's good signs for owners given what we saw at the end of last year as well. So have to wait and see what happens. They could just be trying some youngsters, but there's been a lot of talk of that over the preseason. It seems to be happening at the moment. So monitor that one. The article came out last week saying Thilthorpe was guaranteed number 1 ruck spot this year for the Crows, and then
Don't read into that.
barely
too much.
sorted. Riley O'Brien was still did most of the rucking. So, yeah, media's maybe suggesting otherwise, but I don't see it happening just yet. Josh Rochelle or Rankin didn't get a lot of CBAs. They did roll up to the midfield at times, but didn't spend heaps of times there. Rankin was just classy out forward. He's a class player. I just can't see him spending that much time away from the goals, given what he can do.
No, I think
in front of
Rankin's
the
going to be
goals.
playing very deep forward most of the year.
Yeah.
You take him out of the forward line, you're damaging yourself really just because of what he can do. He can win games off his own boot up there. So.
Absolutely. But yeah, Rochelle probably can go had to get a bit more midfield time, but just didn't see that much of it this game, that's all. Wayne Miller basically just confirmed he'll be playing defence this year. I think it's probably more relevant for Classic given he's a bit cheaper, but I don't know how much more he can...
It's pretty much all the articles that was written about him last year. You can just reread them because we didn't get what we wanted out of him last year, but I think you probably get a little bit better.
Yeah.
He's playing that role we wanted to see last year.
Darcy Fogarty was a presence up forward. Tex Walker didn't play, which means he was more of a target, but I just think monitor to see what happens in regards to Walker's selection, if they go with him and Thilthorpe or whether they kind of phase him out a little bit more.
I thought Himmelberg was crazy. He improved so much over the offseason, and everyone's been saying he's had a massive preseason. So
yeah, I just like Fogarty because I know he's going to play every week. He's probably their best key forward at the moment.
Yeah,
and he's pretty reliable in front of goals. Can generally.
But I'm more
bags.
thinking along the lines of like Himmelberg and Thilthorpe have sort of come along a little bit in their development.
True. Yeah, so just peg him back a little bit.
Yeah, might peg Tex back a little bit in terms of his need.
Yeah, and the other one was Rory Sloane. Just played a decent game in a really bruise-free role in the wing.
Probably not very fantasy. Didn't rack up a lot of the ball.
Yeah, but I don't know. He had enough, I think. But might, if he plays that role, he could push, like a low 80s kind of score every now and then. So might be someone you could pick up super late, given that it's probably going to be his last season. And if you can get him, for a bench option, he'd probably go close to the 80 mark. Yeah. Not the worst idea to do. Any other players that
I just had the Crows midfield look really young and inexperienced. That's probably why Will Brodie and Sarong and those types just looked like they were having it so easy. Like they would have had monster games. I don't know what the stats were, but it looked like Brodie and Sarong were having like 150s type games. Yeah. So they played like Schoenberg, Sam Berry, Rochelle through the midfield a lot. And they just didn't look up to scratch. As much as I love them as blokes, I don't think they're up to scratch to play full-time mid-minutes, and I just think it's going to be a bit of a difficult year. Matt Crouch spent a little bit of time in there. I think he had about 40% CBA, and he looked like Matt Crouch of old, like nothing's changed. I just don't understand how he's not getting a game. Like he looks good with the footy in hand, he looks mature, makes good decisions with the ball.
There was a few times where he probably missed a target that was kind of vital, but it still kind of ended up working out for him. You know what I mean?
He racks up so much of the ball though. It just has to. I just don't understand how he's not in their best 22. I just couldn't pick it together. I can't wait for the end of the year when we get him at St Kilda. So I put it as well. Luke Pedler, he's been real popular in Classic, which has probably filtered over to him getting picked up in a few draft leagues. Yeah. But I spoke to Louis about this on the weekend as well. He's like, I just can't see his role. Yeah. He's not going to play in the midfield.
It's going to be forward if it's anything.
So in the Sandford when he scored well, he's had midfield minutes. Yeah. And he just can't squeeze in there at the moment. If Matt Crouch can't squeeze in there, how the hell can Luke Pedler squeeze in there? Yeah, absolutely. So if he's playing up forward, he's competing against Rankin, Rochelle, McAdam as that small mid-sized forward. Yeah. Not going to see a heap of it. I just don't think he's going to be what everyone's ranking him out to be. He probably spent a fair bit of time on Sandford. Yeah. One for the future, but everyone's so hot on him this year, I just can't see it.
For sure. Moving on to the last game, West Coast versus Port Adelaide. A few players, there's a few quick notes I've got here. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But
I've spent heaps of time on Port Adelaide. Not so much West Coast, but I think Port are the most fantasy relevant team this year.
I hope so.
They were one of the highest scoring teams last year.
There is talk of more of a faster game plan, playing more along the lines of a Sydney or a Collingwood or something like that, which might hamper
rolling
them.
The ball on quicker.
But I didn't really see too much of a difference really this year. But a few players I noticed, and I'll let you go through your list here, which is quite a long one. Scott Lycett just looked in good touch. Clear number one ruck, just a real bruiser in the ruck. Brent Teagle good around the ground, but just doesn't have the same impact in the middle and the centre bounces. So I think he's locked in for that number one ruck role. Horn Francis had plenty of midfield time, and early on in the game, he looked really good, but kind of faded as the game went on and did a few silly things, or just didn't hit targets and things like that. So I don't know. He was given the most midfield minutes out of any player, though. So I guess that's encouraging, given that he's
76% CBAs. So.
Yeah. Just one thing to note there. What do you think of Horn Francis? What did you make of the game?
I don't know. I thought he got better as the game went on in terms of his contested ball winning. He was playing shitloads of midfield time, and early in the game, he just looked a bit out of it, in terms of where he had to position himself. And then he turned the ball over a few times. I saw him do this in the trial game as well. Like he hasn't done a lot of training the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Because he had those surgery to the back of his legs. But yeah, I think as the game went on, like he won a few clearances and did some really special stuff, like as a clearance player, and I think that could be important to Port.
Yep.
But yeah, I think he's going to play a fair bit of midfield time. Boakey's due for a bit up forward, and
Boak got injured. I don't know how he's going. Have you heard anything on that?
Nah, I think it was just a shitload of bruising on like the lungs and stuff, which would be no good. Probably won't train, but yeah, probably might be good for round one.
Kane Farrell had a good game early on, and he kind of went missing. I think he might have actually come off at some stage because I didn't see him later on in the game, but he found a lot of it early. Had it kind of similar to Kadeem Coleman, but probably less special looking, really. But had quite a few shots at goal from that half-back line running up the ground. So he's one I do like just because I think he's just got a weapon that no one else at Port Adelaide possesses.
They might try to get his leg. Yeah, exactly. Had a shot of goal from like 55 out and it went probably 15 metres over the goal line.
Absolutely smashed it through. So, yeah, I like him this year just because I think they'll try to get the ball in his hands just because he can penetrate the footy out forward. Bergman slotted into the wing and kind of plays a Bayman. And I thought he looked really good, did some nice things. Even like just little things like pushing back to cover in defence and taking a few grabs back there.
He just moved up and down the wing so well. So he was good in the trial game as well. So definitely I'd rank him as their number one winger.
And I think Dersma did enough on the other wing, but I'm just not convinced he's going to be a big scorer. I think he's one of those ones that kind of falls into that winger that kind of gets a bit lost in the middle.
Would have been good to see him go into the midfield.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think he's been playing outside. Jace Burgoyne's a player I think could be a round one starter.
I think he is a round one starter. The way he's played, sort of the back end of last year,
looks pretty comfortable.
He looks so at ease. Like he's going to be a 15-year player for Port. Like
is he 19 years old?
Yeah. He's just so composed with the footy.
I think he actually follows us on TikTok as well. So
yeah,
Jace.
He'll be he'll lock himself down. He'll be played probably 300 games for Port the way he's going.
The other one, I guess a lot of people have been talking about. Lockie Jones got more CBAs, but I just don't know what to make of it. What do you make of it?
Yeah, Boak went down injured.
Yeah, someone else had to.
Butters is nowhere near. The midfield is injured. And I mean, Wines is still carrying a little bit of injury.
Yeah.
They haven't been using Willem Drew as much in the midfield. They didn't use him as much in the trial, and they didn't use him as much on the weekend as I thought they would.
Yeah.
With those injuries to Boak and Wines.
Yeah.
Lockie Jones, maybe just because he's bumped the table. Because he's young and, got a lot of promise and high draft pick. Give him blood him a bit of time.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be pretty versatile. He can play up forward, play down back, play the wing, play the midfield. You'll see, I think he's best 22. But I just don't think his CBAs will be as high come round one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't even know what his role is really, whether it's forward, whether it's back, but yeah. You've got Aliir in your notes. What do you make of his game?
Yeah, he is another one that I think is real keeper league relevant because not so much classic, scoring's not going to be nuts, but in 2021, he was dishing up some 70s and 80s, taking a shitload of marks. And I mean, he got All Australian. I feel like a lot of teams sort of found him out last year and sort of worked out how best to because Aliir was the whole reason Port were dominating for a period there. He was just unplayable, winning games for Port Adelaide.
Yeah.
In 2021, come 2022, they sort of was getting shut down a bit more.
Yeah.
But he looked good, and I mean they're only playing West Coast, so it wasn't too damaging. They didn't have Josh Kennedy or Jack Darling.
Yeah.
But he was getting free and taking a lot of those marks like he was in 2021. So just one to keep an eye on because I feel like he's probably not in a lot of teams, in keeper teams.
Yeah.
If he can just dish up consistent 70s and 80s, it's very handy. He's a very consistent scorer, we've talked about in the past, that flat line scoring.
Yeah.
I'd put a star next to his name and just watch this week.
Anyone else?
Pau Pepper looks like he's ready to take his game to another gear. He's had a kid in the off season. He's matured up. He's not going to the nightclubs anymore.
Taking it seriously.
And he hits the ball so hard. I'm just dusty wise. Attacks the footy so hard.
He was another one that was back in the midfield by the end of the game as well.
Yeah, even up forward though, he just looks so dangerous.
He rolls to the stoppage, and plays that extra body, but then can kick a goal as well. So.
Yeah, he kicked 2 or 3 goals as well on the weekend. So.
He's a 75 average, minimum, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon we're looking at more 90 average because if he gets a few midfield rotations.
Take that, for sure. Didn't really get much last year at all.
I just had in my notes, him and Dan Houston probably the two most underrated footballers in the AFL. They don't get spoken about a lot, but they're just their role they play the team. Dan Houston can play anywhere on the field, and Pau Pepper's sort of shown he can now play up forward and in the midfield.
Yeah.
Those versatility type players that just feel... I had written in my notes exact words that a lot of that Richmond era in 2017, the players didn't change.
Yeah.
Just that when they started winning games, everyone started speaking about the players.
Yeah.
So I feel if Port start winning games, Dan Houston and Sam Pepper are going to become household names. But
yeah,
they're just great team players, and probably both are going to average 90.
Yep.
I'm worried about Port's start of the season here because I looked at they've got Boak bruised and battered now. Ollie Wines had that sore knee.
Yeah, he looked a bit off it.
Butters is out of the team currently. Ratio's so like injury prone. Horn Francis is lacking match fitness because he hasn't done a lot of preseason. And then they've started the year, they've got Brisbane, Collingwood, the Showdown, and Sydney. So it's like 4 really tough games. Like the Showdown, you're playing Crows, but that's one of the toughest games of the year.
Fair chance will be, 1-3 type.
That happened to them last year. Is they were like 9-5 or 9-4, and it really mentally just ruined them. And I'm just worried, like, if they go 9-4 here, they're going to be mentally ruined. They're not hitting the season with their strongest side.
Yeah.
And they're hitting the strongest team. So it's just like, it could be a difficult year.
Don't worry, Ken Hinkley will sell it.
The supporters will jump off. Like, that's the problem. They already hate
They should have last year, but they didn't.
Yeah. But
Kept believing.
I thought Port was stiff last year because of just how they started the season. Like, they were a much better side, but because they started 0-4, 0-5, like, they were mentally just screwed.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
it's a tough start of the year, and they're a bit bruised and battered at the moment. So it could be how that first 4 games go will like determine how the rest of the season goes. Really, like
I agree. Need to snatch one of those wins early, but I just don't see it happening. Moving on to West Coast, the last team to talk about. Elliot Yeo, back to his best. He's in basically every classic team. Going to go higher than his average suggests in drafts, I think, as well. I think in our keeper league, he went a lot earlier than everyone else did around that average. So, yeah, he's definitely one that I think he's
spent a lot of time rotating to defence.
Did go through the midfield, though, as well.
He was midfield and defence.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like he's a bit overhyped at the moment. I saw him jump very early in a lot of drafts. For a bloke that's like was he 31 now? Or?
I don't know. I didn't know it was that old. But yeah, I don't know. I thought he looked pretty good. I thought he was one of West Coast's best players. So, and in a struggling side, I can see him going pretty well, especially because he's listed as a defender as well. I don't mind him. Tim Kelly played forward, which I thought was interesting.
He just looked back to his Geelong best.
Yeah.
He had an off season last year and
had no support around him.
It could have been a lot of like, you've come from Geelong, who are like a top 4 side, and you've gone to the wooden spoon. It was like, it can be quite hard to like, you don't have good ball users around you and you don't have the same structure. But yeah, he just looked to have a bit more confidence in his game.
Yeah, I think he looked a lot better as well. If he's playing as forward more, I don't know how well he's going to score fantasy-wise, but actually...
Could get some DVP, though. Like he did have at Geelong, which is very handy.
Definitely. Chess Campbell on the wing. He was
one of the better ones.
Really comfortable.
He looks so composed with the ball. Like, he's only in his second year, and he hasn't played a game yet. But he looked like someone who'd been on the list for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
There was one moment early in the game, he sort of took the ball on the wing and spun past 2 Port players and then kicked and hit the target.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, this kid has not played a game yet. And he's like, just like weaved through 2 oncoming players. Like, no, it was nuts. It looked like someone who'd been playing for 5 or 6 years.
He'll play around one and
definitely he would lock himself in. The commentators were loving him as well. So
absolutely. Jai Cully was firmly in that midfield mix. Bit of forward time as well, I think. But he's another one that I think is going to be. I don't know, just because he got overlooked in his draft year. I think he's just still a bit undervalued.
He's only 20.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I thought he was a bit older. Like, I thought he was like 23, 24. So he's still got a bit of development in him. Like, he's still young. And I just, most 20-year-olds aren't even playing at the moment. Like, they're still just playing in the 2s. So he's still very young, got a bit of development to come. So
someone in the chat has written, is that Checkers or Oliver Tree? I think you cop that a bit, don't you?
Get out a fair bit. It's Oliver Tree, actually.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it is definitely Oliver Tree. I'm lucky to have him in the studio. I found the second ruck battle, or could even be the first ruck battle, pretty interesting. So Williams versus Callum Jamison, really.
Yeah.
I think they both kind of put their case forward and were okay. So.
Williams looked stronger. Jamison looked a bit more versatile for me.
Yeah.
Williams took a few good contested marks.
Yeah.
But Jamison just moved a bit nicer. I don't know. They could play both. They might very well play both.
Yeah, probably will. Nick Nat's still injured, isn't he? So see how he goes there. And the last one I've got is just Elijah Hewitt. He just showed some glimpses. I think he's got a special option going forward. Just, stash him away. He might take a bit of time. But, did some nice things as well in that game. I guess Dom Sheed is another one we can talk about. What did you make of his game?
He just had a touch of class in the midfield. They had playing... Gaff was playing outside on the wing. Shuey just looks a bit slow and old.
Yeah.
I thought at times Yo, when he went down back, they just lacked a bit of experience in that midfield, and she just coming back just adds a bit of class. They're obviously a team that had a terrible year last year.
Yeah.
He's going to be just a handy addition to come back. I don't know if his scoring will be massive.
I think it'd be like around the 90 mark.
Yeah, probably 85 to 90. Yeah. I don't think he's going to burst through, and I don't think they're going to win a lot of games, so it's quite hard to average 100 plus.
But he's still only 26 or 27.
Yeah,
I think,
he's just in that mould where he's not too old and going to be washed up after this year. Like, he's going to be the next gen.
Not a bad option for keeper league, I reckon. Anyways, we might wrap it up there. So, just if you want to support the podcast, please sign up by becoming a member. We've got our rankings out at the moment, the ranking spreadsheets, so you can do your own rankings, I guess. They help you with those. Drafty Fantasy Analysis is up there to help you in the Dynasty Leagues where you're just picking the rookies. Breakout Tracker to see who's going to break out this year. Much, much more. Basically, every membership keeps this podcast going. And yeah, it's been a battle this year, so thanks to all the members out there, because if it weren't for the members, this podcast would definitely be done by now. So thanks for that. Yeah, so we'll wrap it up. Checkers, get around you on Marmalade Oz on all the socials.
Yeah, join our fantasy league. Actually, that's
right.
what I'm trying to plug at the moment.
Yeah,
is we had 1,000 people in our classic league last year, so I'm hoping to get similar numbers.
Yeah, I'll repost the.
But what we've done
code
this year is we've hit up a few businesses and we've got some good prizes coming. So
yeah, I saw a pretty swift looking hat.
Yeah, we're getting a hat made.
Yeah,
getting a few prizes donated. So
that
should be pretty handy. Last year we didn't have a prize for first place, but this year, yeah.
All right, I'll get involved.
Be able to give something away.
Get involved. I'll finish somewhere around 800th, but we'll see how we go. Yeah, get around us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at Keeper League Pod on all of those. Support our sponsors, Manscaped. Use Keeper20 at checkout. Get 20% off and free shipping. And yeah, that wraps it up. Thanks for joining me this week, Checkers.
Cheers
and
for having me
we'll
on.
Talk to all the listeners soon. See you later. See you, peeps. Bye, stream.